I finished another book. This one was The Telltale Lilac Bush and Other West Virginia Ghost Tales by Ruth Ann Musick, I guess her name is pronounced, or Musick. But this is actually an older book. I got this book when I was in West Virginia, and this is a book that was written back in the 30s. Musick was it was published in the 60s. She collected this in the 30s. She was part of the Works Progress Administration that was going around at that time collecting folklore from the Appalachians in particular. And she spent a lot of her time in West Virginia collecting a lot of these folktale ghost stories and different things along those lines. And she compiled them eventually into a book and published them. As she was part of this collecting these things. But she died in 1974. But this is actually a pretty comprehensive and more interesting bunch of ghost lore, because she categorizes them into different types of ghost stories. And she specifically said she tried to make it where it was a broad, different type of these stories in each category. It was not just the same thing or variations of the same story over and over and over, which you will see a lot of time in ghost stories and different things, because a lot of times they are the same motif being used over and over. And this one, she made this more interesting. This one was a more interesting, especially for it being an older book, was more interesting as a collection of ghost stories. And West Virginia is very rife with them. I have no clue what it is about West Virginia that seems to conjure up lots of cryptids and ghost stories and hauntings and all sorts of stuff. In the state, I don't know. I don't know if it's because it is an Appalachian area and that is so much part of that folklore, or whether it is just because it's the only state that's entirely in the Appalachians and therefore it is a very mountainous, that is the whole culture of that state. I'm not sure, but it is very different from other states in the fact that we all have some cryptids here and there, but West Virginia seems to have the lion's share with Mothman and all sorts of weird ones. When we were there, we were in an area that Bigfoot was supposed to be. We stayed at the Sasquatch Cabin because it was where Bigfoot in that area, and they've kind of tailored their Airbnb to that sort of demographic. At least West Virginia, they've realized to market on some of this stuff. But it's an interesting sort of thing that I've never run into a state that has such a wide variety of supernatural stuff. It's very odd. The South is very ghosty. I say that in a weird way, but there is a certain amount of ghost lore a lot of times. Tennessee specifically seems to be very connected to the Civil War. And if you've ever read a book called Ghostland, it goes into detail about sometimes what his theory was on why there is such a fascination with ghosts in the United States and such a fascination with those particular stories and which hauntings actually happen and that sort of a thing. But West Virginia stands out to me because it is such a interesting and in some places so isolated that I think that is part of some of it as well, because of the way the layout of the state is. But this is a good as a cultural book. It's good as just ghost stories. It's good as a history kind of an area. I would recommend this one. This was a really good ghost book in format and research and everything, and she tried to keep it interesting and tried to keep it kind of a wide variety, that she wasn't overplaying herself in certain categories in different areas. West Virginia is also known as being the only state that has a ghost testified on the stand, because basically a woman was murdered and her mother said that her ghost was visiting her in a dream and telling her about what happened and that her husband had killed her. Now, my theory on what this was a mother who had a suspicion of what had happened with her ratchet son-in-law, that she very much realized he had done this and sort of used this, either was having these dreams maybe because of her imagination, or she was utilizing this to try to give a little more credence to her suspicions about the son-in-law. They throw it around that it was part of the trial. It wasn't actually. It was just kind of mentioned a little bit in the trial. It was not actually used as actual evidence. She just mentioned this. She was asked about it by the prosecutor, I believe, that was, the defense, I believe, asked her about it, and that trying to like discredit her a little bit, and she just said, well, yeah, I've been having these visions that my daughter, her ghost is visiting me. So it wasn't really utilized as evidence. It was just kind of something that was mentioned in the trial. That gets the kind of circus around that gets a little bit pushed forward because of how strange that is to be in a trial. But it wasn't really used as evidence per se. It was just part of something that was mentioned. And that bird is really loud, and he's just parked himself across the tree. But anyway, West Virginia, that just all sort of checks out. And this book, very, very good, and would recommend this one as one of the better ones I've read in a while.